Freedom Fighters holds a pretty important place in my heart, seeing as it was one of the few games I would spend many an hour playing with my brothers. Yeah, if you know what this is, then welcome to the Older Gamer Club. Developed by IO Interactive, the same studio behind the original Hitman game, and published by our good old friends, early 2000 EA. When it was released in 2003, it was met with pretty positive reception from the at the time majorly innovative squad controls, making it a major selling point of the game. Freedom Fighters is a third-person action shooter where you play as Chris Stone fighting off a massive Soviet invasion in New York City in an alternate timeline, where the Russians got the atomic bomb first and used it to win World War II, and not only that, but conquer the entirety of Europe. With this consolidation of power, the US was, in a more basic sense, put on the back foot for the entirety of the Cold War, as Soviet-style communism spread throughout the planet. Before I get too far, I feel I should talk about the music of this game, and in my opinion, the music is pure chef's kiss. Mwah! It was composed by Jesper Kyd, and this man is a prolific artist, composing soundtracks for numerous games from the 1990s even to today. There is a lot that goes into making the soundtrack for games, and the music here really showcases this man's talents. Many of the tracks will give you that feeling of the overall weight of the Russian oppression that has befallen the setting, and the hope that is rising up and growing in strength, much like the rebellion you are fighting in. The soundscape of the game kind of varies in quality outside of the soundtrack. The bulk of the weapons don't really sound as punchy as they should. There are a few standouts amongst the weapons, however, and the explosions are pretty tame. I want to note that I'm playing on the PC, which unfortunately removes the multiplayer features, and unless you're willing to dust off an old 6th generation console, you're going to be out of luck if you want to play with a friend. Also, since it's made in the early 2000s, some of the more comedic bits and pieces might not land so well today. Since there really isn't much else to this one, I'm gonna hop right into the story. It all begins, depending on where you're from, in the greatest city in the US, New York, where we follow two brothers as they head to their next client, an activist by the name of Isabella Angelina. Shortly after arriving, they find the apartment abandoned like someone had left in a hurry or something. Just then, a squad of Soviet soldiers burst in the apartment searching for Isabella. After roughing up your brother, they take him in for questioning. We were lucky and hid in the next room, but now we have to find out what the heck is going on. As we make it out of the unit, we rescue some civilians from a Soviet officer and meet Mr. Jones. Together we take out a few more soldiers and make our way out to the streets. It's here where a full-blown Soviet invasion is underway. Eventually we fight our way to the sewers, where we then try and figure out our next course of action. This is where we get a glimpse of what's happening throughout the city, albeit with a bit of a skewed perspective.
Citizens of New York and comrades from the Soviet Armed Forces, welcome to our first news broadcast after today's events. My name is Tatiana Kempinski, and I will be your regular news anchor from now on.
It turns out that Isabella has been captured and is currently being held in a police station. Before we can even attempt to sneak in, we are stopped by some officers trying to fight back against the Russians, though they are pinned down by snipers and can't cross the street. This introduces very subtly one mechanic that makes you play the game with a whole new mindset. The maps of each chapter are interconnected, so say you take out a helipad in one level, there won't be choppers patrolling in the others. Likewise, if you were to take out a supply depot, you'd see a few less soldiers around. Not by many, but still a few. We have to sneak over to another area and set some C4 on some gas tanks to eliminate the snipers. With them taken care of, we make our way to the parking garage of the police station, and we work now on clearing the building. Eventually we free Isabella and raise the stars and stripes over their station, completing the area. Isabella leads us to a resistance hideout, where they plan on taking out a nearby fire station, which the Soviets are using as a supply depot, but it's also where, for the moment, they're holding your brother Troy. We rescue him and liberate the supplies from the Soviets.
AK-47s for everyone!
After raising the flag, we retreat to the sewers to plan our next move. It was also during this chunk of gameplay we're introduced to the squad mechanics. At the time I had never played any game like this, where you could order your allies around and help you in combat, and complete objectives. The closest I had got to this level of strategy was in real-time strategy games themselves. Mind you, I was very young when I played this game. They only have 3 basic commands: regroup, attack, and defend. You start out with only 2 soldiers, but you can max out at 12. And when you send them to a position, they become a pure murder ball of freedom. With the Soviet occupation now properly in full swing, we are still keeping up the pressure on them, but it's becoming more and more difficult as the Soviets start to dig in and entrench themselves. We get briefed on the situation and that there are 3 locations that they want us to hit. We also hear from our brother who wants to set out and see if he can drum up more resistance fighters from across the nation to come and help. We are sent to rescue some POWs and secure a hotel. It's kind of at this point where the interconnectivity of the maps really plays in, especially when it comes to destroying things such as helipads and bridges. It's also in this chapter we run into an annoying little APC that just cruises through and drops troops off that you have to fight, and I'm not gonna lie, they can get a solid flanking maneuver on you if you're not paying attention to them. As the rebellion draws out, it starts to become more practical to perform more operations at night.
Autumn is definitely here. There is a chill in the air, but the citizens of New York are coping, thanks to the many Soviet engineers working overtime to repair the many power stations that were damaged during the recent rash of rebel attacks.
We know how to sneak past spotlights in better fortified positions, but an opportunity to hit several critical Soviet outposts opens up to us. The movie theater in this operation is where Soviets are taking people for re-education before shipping them off to Alaska. But a major target is also the power plant that the Soviets have less defended than normal. Once again showing the interconnectivity of the map, seeing as if you take out the transformer tower, all the nearby bases will have less power, which means no spotlights, making it easier to sneak around. The warehouses are next to where the Soviets are moving troops and supplies out. We can take out some bridges and ensure the reinforcements are not able to properly be deployed. With the base captured, we move on to the next chapter. We find out that our brother Troy has been captured once more, and then our identity as the Freedom Phantom has been revealed. They drag our brother out on stage to force him to speak. As he's doing so, he breaks from the script and warns us.
So Chris, for my sake, and the sake of the new system, I beg you to stop your terrorist activities. Okay, just surrender to the authorities, and they'll treat you fairly. The Soviet government gives you their word of honor. Just please do as they ask.
It is obvious that the heroic Soviet army has once
Everything
again...
I said was lies. They forced me, Chris. Don't believe this stinking propaganda. Keep fighting! Set us all free!
Sadly, we find out a little after this that the Soviets killed him. And now it's personal. We set out to take out the leader of the Soviet forces in the area, General Tatarin. We infiltrate Governor's Island in a daring solo operation, taking us to the heart of the Soviet command center. We sneak our way into the base, carefully taking out guards as we go. It was also around this stage in the game where I noticed that how quiet the weapons are. Now, I'm no weapons expert, far from it, but I do know that a lot of these weapons should sound a lot louder, especially if they don't have a suppressor on them. And that you should definitely hear some of these rounds being fired from at least a few hundred feet. Even fighting some of the guards should have brought the whole base to high alert. Regardless, we make our way to a vantage point after sneaking around for some more. We get our target in sight and take the shot. With the general eliminated, the base goes into high alert, and now we have to escape, which is somewhat easier said than done, but we managed to make it out of there. When we return from our mission, we are greeted with a familiar voice, but what he's saying is truly shocking. It turns out Mr. Jones, one of our major sources of intel, especially at the start of the war, is actually none other than Comrade Colonel Bulba of the KGB, who through our actions is now in charge of the Soviet forces invading New York, seeing as we just took out his boss. But our larger problem is escaping his ambush at our headquarters. It's kind of jarring to see the place that we thought was safe invaded. We are put on the run as we make our way through the sewers. It's frantic, close quarters fighting as we meet up with a few others and retreat to a new hideout. We are now on the back foot.
This is indeed a day of infamy. We are gathered here today to bid farewell to our great leader. We came to restore law and order, to secure peace and stability in this region, and save the American citizens from brutality and exploitation. And this is the brave general's reward? He shall not have died in vain. As second in command, I respectfully take his place, and I vow today to track down the cowardly scum who committed this outrage. I swear revenge today on the so-called Freedom Phantom, Christopher Stone, and puny army of remaining rebels for the brutal killing of our beloved leader, Tatarin.
With Bulba in charge, he's implemented more brutal measures to hinder the resistance. We hear word of another re-education center being set up in a nearby high school as well. After sneaking past a few checkpoints and taking out a helipad, we launch our assault, even freeing some POWs along the way. After a lot of tense, close quarters fighting, we start to clear out the Soviets. With the school secured after a bitter fight, we move on to a TV station nearby. The mission is pretty simple. We have to capture the SAFN studio and deliver a broadcast of our own. I do find it pretty funny that a lot of the promotional material for the game showcases big chunks of this mission, and I can see why though. I also recommend you keep a rocket launcher handy. As we make our way to the newsroom, the whole way running into heavy resistance as we fight through offices and hallways. Eventually we make it to the studio and Chris gives a speech to rally the resistance for an all-out uprising.
New Yorkers, fellow Americans, I am Chris Stone, the so-called Freedom Phantom. I stand before you today a free man, and I vow to die a free man. Like you, my world was shattered 8 long months ago. I watched as my family and friends were tortured, captured, and killed. I have nothing left of my former life, except the hope for a better future. A better future for our children. The American dream. I, for one, still believe in that dream. We've read this in our school books as children. Now is the time for us to embrace those ideals and stand up against the weight of tyranny. We have a duty to ourselves to throw off our oppressors. When I look around this city, I do not see smoldering ruins. No, instead, I see a sleeping army, ready to awaken. The world is watching us now. How we respond will prove our claim. I stand before you and the world today to reaffirm the pledge our forefathers made to each other and for each of us, to protect our lives, our fortunes, and our self-worth. So I ask you now to take up arms against the evil invaders and yell in their faces that they will never take our freedom. Freedom.
So this is it. We're launching a major push into Governor's Island. As we launch a full frontal assault, we get spotted. And well, we get hit hard. And now our forces are in disarray. We have to push into a munitions depot and get some materials to be able to get more fighters in the fight by sabotaging a vent in the harbor. After taking the harbor, we now have to start clearing out the areas around Fort J. No matter where you go, you are given a full squad and encounter heavy Soviet resistance. The locations around here do start to feel kinda samey, with no major set pieces to really differentiate them. That is until we get to Fort J. If you cleared all the areas before this, it's going to be relatively easy, but it's still a tough nut to crack, seeing as the Soviets really dug in here. After a hard-fought battle to breach the outer defenses, we make our way in and fight our way to rescue Isabella. With her in tow, we then set out to raise the stars and stripes on all corners of the fort. With that, we get the final cutscene, with Chris moping around knowing that the Russians will come back, and in greater numbers. He and Isabella share a tender moment, and, well, that's that. Actually, there's also a hidden level, but you have to beat the game on the 2 higher difficulties to unlock it. The Liberty Island map, which is pretty small, is pretty straightforward. You move up the island and take out any Soviets you encounter. Eventually you get to the statue's torch, and well, you see the actual end. Freedom Fighters is a fairly short game, though for what it is, it's truly incredible. We don't see too many games out there nowadays with this type of special sauce that this game has. But I've waxed nostalgic for just about all these videos. There's a friend of mine I haven't heard from in a while. Last time I saw him, he said something about fighting some orcs, but now he's taking on something far more sinister. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and have a good one.